He didn't hold back. In a fiery address, President Ibrahim Traoré called out Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, questioning his loyalty to African unity and accusing him of bowing to Western influence. The remarks exploded across Africa, dividing opinions and exposing deep cracks in the continent's leadership. In the heart of Abuja, Nigeria's capital, the air crackled with anticipation inside the vast auditorium of the Transcorp Hilton Convention Center. The room was a sea of delegates, regional leaders, diplomats, journalists, and aides, all gathered for a summit on West Africa's economic trajectory. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the weight of what was to come. At the center of it all was Bola Tinubu, Nigeria's president. His name was synonymous with firm, no-nonsense leadership. His graying hair and measured demeanor spoke of years of navigating the intricate web of African politics. But today, a subtle tension lingered in his eyes as he prepared to deliver his keynote address. Across the auditorium stood Ibrahim Traoré, the charismatic young leader of Burkina Faso. His smart suit and confident posture drew attention, but it was his bold nationalist policies, restricting foreign multinationals to boost Burkina Faso's domestic economy, that drew murmurs among the delegates. Traoré's gaze was resolute. A glint of defiance flashed in his eyes as he watched Tinubu. Whispers of an imminent showdown between the two leaders hung in the air. Their visions for Africa's future seemed at odds. Standing next to Tinubu, Amina watched her shrewd economic advisor survey the room. She sensed what was at stake. This summit could reshape Nigeria's relationship with Burkina Faso and set the tone for regional cooperation. "Stay focused, sir," she murmured to Tinubu, who nodded, his eyes still fixed on Traoré. Across the way, Kalilu Dio, Burkina Faso's seasoned foreign minister, stood beside Traoré. Their calmness belied a fierce loyalty to their leader's vision. "They will challenge us, but we are ready," Dio whispered, adjusting his glasses. Traoré gave a faint, knowing smile. In the crowd, Chidioro, a veteran journalist with a knack for capturing the pulse of African politics, scribbled notes. His pen moved quickly, sensing a historic moment unfolding. This was not just a summit. It was a clash of generations, ideologies, and dreams for a continent. Nearby, a new figure, Naya, a rising Ghanaian economist known for her bold ideas on regional trade, watched quietly. Her presence added another layer to the debate. Her reputation for bridging divides made her a joker in the room. The moderator, a poised woman with a commanding voice, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we begin with President Tinubu." The room fell silent as Tinubu rose, his deep voice filling the auditorium. "West Africa is at a crossroads," he began deliberately. "Cooperation is our strength. But we must ask, do policies that close the door to global markets really serve our people?" His eyes turned to Traoré, the clear challenge. The audience stirred, feeling the throne in the glove. The Abuja auditorium pulsed with tension as Bola Tinubu's words hung in the air, his pointed critique of isolationist policies aimed squarely at Ibrahim Traoré. The Nigerian president's deep voice carried the weight of experience, his gesture toward regional unity, a call for pragmatism. The delegates shifted in their seats, their murmurs a low hum under the bright lights of the Transcorp Hilton Convention Center. Tinubu's gaze, steady but piercing, found Traoré's across the room, and for an instant the space between them seemed to crackle with silent challenges. Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young leader, sat at the main table, his posture relaxed but his gaze fixed with determination. In his early 30s, he stood in stark contrast to Tinubu's seasoned seriousness. Yet his nationalist export policies, designed to protect Burkina Faso's resources from foreign multinationals, had made him a figure of both admiration and controversy. His fingers drummed lightly on the table, a subtle sign of the energy consuming him. She knew Tinubu's words were more than rhetoric. They were a test, and he was ready to respond. Beside Tinubu, Amina saw her economic advisor scribbling notes, his mind sharp as a whirl. She leaned toward him, her voice a hushed whisper. "He's going to push back hard, sir. We need to stay focused on integration." Tinubu nodded, his jaw set, but his attention remained on Traoré. Amina, with her talent for reading rooms, felt the leadership teetering on a knife edge. This was not just about Nigeria and Burkina Faso. This was about the soul of Africa's economic future. Western. On the other side, Kalilou Dio, Burkina Faso's foreign minister, approached Traoré, his voice low but firm. He is framing us as isolationists. Respond with our vision, self-confidence, not dismissal. Dio's decades of diplomatic experience tempered his tone, but his eyes burned with the same passion as Traoré's. The younger leader nodded briefly, his lips curving into a faint, defiant smile. He was no stranger to criticism, and this was his stage to claim. In the crowd, Chidioro, the journalist whose incisive reporting had earned him a following across the continent, jotted down every detail. His pen flew over his notebook, capturing the nuances of the moment. Tinubu versus Traoré, he wrote, underlining the words. Pragmatism meets idealism. History in the making. Chidi knew that this summit could redefine West Africa's path, and he was determined to tell his story. Nearby, Nia, the Ghanaian economist, watched with great interest. Her presence added a new dynamic. Her recent proposals for a regional trade framework had intensified the debate, and her quiet confidence suggested that she could still play a key role. A new figure, Malick Sow, Senegal's trade minister, stood near the edge of the stage, his arms folded. Known for his straightforward pragmatism, Sow had publicly supported Tinubu's vision of open markets, but privately he admired Traoré's boldness. His presence added another layer of complexity. His influence among the smaller nations of West Africa, a potential turning point in the debate. The moderator's voice cut through the tension. We now invite President Traoré to respond. The room fell silent as Traoré stood, his movements deliberate. He adjusted the microphone, his eyes scanning the audience before settling on Tinubu. Mr. President, he began, his voice clear and resonant. I respect your call for unity, but let's be clear. Burkina Faso is not closing doors. We are building foundations. He paused, letting the words sink in. For too long, our resources have enriched others, while our people have waited for crumbs. Our policies prioritize our youth, our farmers, our future. This is not isolation. This is sovereignty. The room erupted in applause, especially from the younger delegates who saw Traoré as a beacon of change. Tinubu's expression hardened, his fingers tightening on his pen. Amina whispered urgently, he is mobilizing the room. We need to pivot toward common goals. Tinubu nodded slightly, but his frustration was palpable. Chidi Okoro scribbled furiously, noting the shift in the energy in the room. Traoré's idealism is electrifying, he wrote, but Tinubu's experience will not give way easily. Kalilou Diallo, watching from Traoré's side, allowed himself a small smile. Well played, he muttered, but he knew the battle was far from over. Tinubu was a master diplomat, and his response would be measured. Malick Sow, meanwhile, exchanged a glance with Nia Kone, both sensing the need for a bridge between their two visions. Nia's mind was already spinning, her ideas for a hybrid economic model bubbling to the surface. Tinubu stood again, his voice firm but full of intensity. Sovereignty is vital, President Traoré, but it cannot thrive in a vacuum. Protectionism risks starving our economies of innovation and investment. West Africa needs to integrate to compete globally. He gestured widely, his words aimed at the wider audience. We are stronger together, not apart. The delegates murmured, some nodding in agreement. Traoré leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes. He whispered to Dio, he's doubling down. We need to show that our policies are not just rhetoric. Dio nodded, his mind racing with diplomatic strategies. Chidi recorded the exchange, his pen noting the escalating chess match. This is more than a debate, he wrote. It's a clash of the ages. Nia, sensing an opening, raised her hand. The moderator saluted her, and she stood, her voice calm but authoritative. Both leaders make compelling arguments, she said, looking from Tinubu to Traoré. But what if we could combine sovereignty with integration? A regional trade, pact that prioritizes local growth while fostering global ties. Her words hung in the air, drawing intrigued glances from the audience. Malik nodded subtly, impressed by her clarity. Tinubu's eyes lit with interest while Traoré tilted his head, considering Amina. She leaned in close, towards Tinubu and whispered, "She's offering a path forward. We must engage." Tinubu nodded, her expression softening. Traoré, meanwhile, conferred with Dio. "She's smart," Traoré said quietly. "But we can't compromise our core principles." Dio agreed but urged caution. "Let's hear her out. She could influence the room." The moderator seized the moment, inviting questions from the audience. A young delegate from Toulouse rose to address the two leaders. "How do we balance local priorities with global demands?" Tinubu answered first, emphasizing strategic alliances. "No nation thrives alone," he said, his tone measured. The Nigerian backed Tinubu's realism. "It's the future of West Africa that's at stake," Chidi observed, his tape recorder recording every word. When the session resumed, the moderator announced, "The final decision." Speeches. Tinubu took the podium, his voice booming. "We are here to forge a shared destiny," he said, his gaze sweeping around the room. "Economic walls may seem, we are building bridges, but they limit our potential. Instead, let us build bridges." The audience applauded, though a few glances went to Traoré, awaiting his response. Traoré stood, his presence imposing. "Mr. President," he said, his tone respectful but firm. "Bridges are only as strong as their foundations. Burkina Faso is investing in our people, our land, our future. If that means challenging old models, we will do so." His voice rose, setting the room ablaze. "We say no to exploitation, no to cooperation." The applause was thunderous, especially from the younger delegates. Tinubu, visibly upset, whispered to Amina, "He is playing with emotions." Amina nodded, urging restraint. "We can fight back with unity." Chidi, watching from the sidelines, wrote, "The summit is at stake. Two visions that will not bend." Sensing the impasse, Nia stood up again, her voice cutting through the tension. "What if we created a framework in which local economies were first strengthened and then regionally integrated? A phased approach could align both visions." Malik Sow nodded, adding, "Segal would support such a plan. It's practical but bold." The room stirred, the idea gaining momentum. Tinubu and Traoré exchanged a look, each considering the proposal. Amina whispered to Tinubu, "This could work. It's a compromise without surrender." Dio, advising Traoré, agreed. "It respects our principles, but it opens doors." The moderator proposed a working session, and Tinubu and Traoré shook hands, a brief but symbolic gesture. In the smaller group, discussions were intense but productive. Tinubu acknowledged the need for local protections, while Traoré recognized the value of gradual integration. Amina and Dio mediated, with Nia and Malik offering practical suggestions. At the end of the session, the leaders returned to the stage. Tinubu spoke first in a lighter tone. "We have found common ground," he said, "a path that respects sovereignty and promotes unity." Traoré added, "This is a partnership built on mutual respect, not on compromises on our values." Africa is rising, but not all of its leaders are moving in the same direction. That became painfully clear when President Ibrahim Traoré, never one to mince words, publicly criticized Nigerian President Bola Tinubu in a speech that echoed far beyond Burkina Faso. What started as a commentary on foreign intervention quickly turned into a powerful and controversial call-out that's sparking fierce debate across the continent. Traoré's remarks came during a summit on African sovereignty, where he addressed the urgent need for continental unity in the face of neo-colonial pressure. But then, without warning, he shifted his focus directly to Tinubu. He questioned Nigeria's role in regional diplomacy, accused Tinubu of aligning too closely with Western interests, and warned that any leader who protects colonial chains while his people suffer is part of the problem, not the solution. The crowd gasped, the media exploded, and within hours, Social platforms across Africa were ablaze. In Nigeria, some defended Tinubu, calling Traoré's comments divisive and disrespectful. Others, especially the youth and critics of foreign dependence, praised Traoré for saying what many had long felt, but feared to voice. In Burkina Faso and several other West African nations, Traoré was celebrated for his boldness. Hashtags like Africa, for Africans, and Traoré Truth surged across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. But this was more than political drama. This was a raw confrontation about the soul of the continent's future. For years, African leaders have walked a delicate line, trying to balance partnerships with former colonial powers while claiming to defend local interests. Traoré, however, is cutting through that illusion. To him, there's no middle ground. A leader either fights for true independence or becomes an extension of external control. His critique of Tinubu wasn't about personal rivalry, it was about principles. About calling out what he sees as complicity in maintaining a system that keeps African nations dependent, divided, and silent. President Tinubu's office responded cautiously, stating that Nigeria remains committed to Pan-African cooperation and sovereignty. But the lack of a direct rebuttal only fueled more speculation and more support for Traoré's growing influence. This incident signals a deeper shift. African leadership is being redefined, not by age, title, or military strength, but by who is willing to stand up, speak truth, and challenge the status quo. Traoré has become the voice of that new wave, and whether you agree with his tone or not, his message is impossible to ignore. He is forcing a conversation that has long been buried under diplomacy and tradition. A conversation about who Africa serves, who Africa listens to, and who Africa belongs to. Because in Traoré's eyes, the future of Africa will not be built by those who play it safe, but by those who dare to shake the foundation.